Hello, and welcome to The Reckoning: Iran, Israel, America, and War. This podcast explores the relationships among these countries and the events that led to war in 2026. Crossroads of Hate is a 5-part series that examines Western influences on Iranian anti-Semitic propaganda. This has been part of Iran's information warfare against both Israel and the United States. The author is Mark Silinsky. This is the first episode, and it gives the background of Iranian information operations against Israel and Jews. Recurring anti-Semitic tropes from around the world flow into Iran today. Long-suppressed European antisemitism has resurfaced, though not to its former homicidal levels. Over the centuries, global antisemitism has fluctuated wildly. In the Christian and Islamic worlds, there were periods of general indifference toward Jews. However, eras of openness were punctuated by spasms of mass murder, most notoriously during the Crusades, the Black Death, and the Holocaust. In Europe and the Greater Middle East, kings could expel Jewish communities from their homes with little warning. Some would flee with few possessions, hoping to rebuild their lives in their new homes. Expulsions recurred in Europe in the 1930s and 1940s, and again in Iran in the 1980s. Antisemitism is malleable and tapers to indigenous cultures. After the revolution, Iran's leaders promoted anti-Semitic themes that would have been considered vulgar by educated Iranians earlier in the 20th century. Iranian leaders blended elements of Western and Quranic anti-Semitism. Logical inconsistency often does not impede marketing mutually contradictory anti-Semitic concepts. Jews could be simultaneously radical and reactionary, communist and capitalist, cosmopolitan and clannish. Jean-Paul Sartre argued that the anti-Semite does not feel compelled to act logically consistent in painting the Jew. A familiar, centuries-old image in Europe and the Middle East is that of the wandering Jew, portrayed as a stateless, parasitic vagabond. In this view, the Jew belonged to no nation and recognized no law. In European fiction, 2 dominant Jewish characters were Fagin, who ran a criminal syndicate of child pickpockets, and Shylock, a notorious usurer. Mutations of this typecast are often echoed in Iran today by the Ayatollah's penmen. Other stereotypes cast Jews as murderers. In Europe and the Greater Middle East, villagers used the idea of Jewish criminality to explain mysteries or catastrophes, such as children disappearing or the sudden onset of pandemic diseases. With Iran's purge of liberalism in the 1980s came a renaissance of earlier Nazi-crafted anti-Semitism. These early purveyors were Ayatollah Mesbah Yazdi, an intimate of Khomeini, and Ahmad Fardid. After the revolution, Fardid, sometimes called the Iranian Heidegger, taught university courses on Nazi theory and racial hygiene, and promoted Holocaust denial. Muhammad Ali Ramin, an advisor to Ahmadinejad, was an ardent anti-Semite associated with neo-Nazis while living in Germany. He drove Nazi anti-Semitic iconography and passionate Holocaust denial in the Islamic Republic. Several anti-Semitic themes in Iran intersect with Western anti-Semitism. These beliefs maintain that Jews destroy civilizations, grasp for control of the world's political decision-making, manipulate international financial flows, exist as less than human animals, murder non-Jews to use their blood for ritualistic purposes, fabricate claims of the Holocaust to enrich themselves and Israel, pollute indigenous culture, and start wars for their pleasure and benefit. Many of these themes overlap and embellish each other. For example, an Iranian broadcast might claim the Rothschilds pay Israeli soldiers to remove Palestinian children's eyes to sell them on the international market. This example draws a spin on blood libel, national destruction, ill-gotten financial profit, and inhumanity. Bernard Lewis referred to this trend of recycling of European stories as Islamization of anti-Semitism. Jews are destroyers of nations and controllers of the world. Some Iranian and European theologians and public intellectuals accuse Jews of destroying nations. In Europe, this view crystallized during the age of nationalism in the 19th century. European anti-Semites argued that Jews undermine social hierarchy, order, authority, and tradition. Richard Wagner, in Judaism and Music, argued that Jews polluted German art. Iranian media sometimes depict Jews as clever cultural polluters. This was a common theme in the 19th and 20th centuries and was fueled by European nationalism. British philosopher Houston Stewart Chamberlain, Heinrich von Treitschke, composer Richard Wagner, and many public intellectuals decried the inclusion of Jews in their country's national art scene. In the early Third Reich, Minister of Propaganda Joseph Goebbels purged universities and museums of modern art and of works that did not conform to Nazi racial standards. Iranian leaders similarly removed non-Islamic popular culture. According to Iranian leaders, Jewish tactics for destroying civilizations vary. Jews use music, television, and movies to subvert indigenous culture. Delving into history, Iranian intellectuals cast a malign interpretation of the Jewish experience in Europe and Iran. The hidden Jewish hand places its allies in positions of power, particularly in Europe and the United States. Press TV columnists regularly claim that Jews control all elements of American life, including determining, dominating, and controlling every aspect of American lives: social, moral, political, judicial, and economic. By maneuvering European politicians and key civil servants, Jews steer parliamentary decision-making. Some contemporary Iranian intellectuals allege that Jews want to destroy Iran by infiltrating European Jews to wrest power from Muslims. Khamenei repeatedly attacked Jewish members of President Trump's extended family. Singling out Jared Kushner, the supreme leader tweeted volleys against President Trump's extended family, whom he called filthy Zionists. Iranian critics charge that Jews destroy nations by killing their citizens. Iranian news outlets borrow and distort European claims that Jews poisoned wells and food supplies. During the Middle Ages, townspeople killed Jews on these charges. The myth of Jewish poisoners is ancient, persistent, and adaptable in European and Persian traditions. It reverberates in contemporary Iran. Some Iranian educators have dubbed Jews filthy vectors of disease throughout history and have accused them of weaponizing diseases to kill their enemies. One professor explained, "They were the source of lethal diseases, such as the plague and typhoid fever, because they are extremely filthy people." The Quranic claim that a Jew poisoned Muhammad, the prophet, was an entrance exam question for Iran Teachers Training College. In a multiple-choice question, students were asked to identify the killer of Muhammad, and the correct answer was a Jewish woman. Iranian and Western anti-Semites also accuse Jews of creating discord and war. Discord, known as fitna, is a serious charge in Islam. Ali Khamenei said Jews are setting Muslims and Christians against one another. Khamenei said, "These demonstrations and this holy rage that the Muslims displayed at the appropriate time are not directed against the world's Christians, but against those impure hands that have turned the politicians of the hegemonic world into pawns." A 26-episode documentary, Footprints of Zionism in World Cinema, aired in May-June 2008 and promised to expose the true colors of the global film industry. The series promotes the perception that the Western film industry, primarily Hollywood, is controlled by Zionists who strive to teach viewers Zionist subliminal messages. It warns that these messages operate on the viewer's subconscious and consequently convince the viewer of their veracity. This concludes this episode of The Reckoning: Iran, Israel, America, and War. The second episode examines more propaganda themes. Nothing in this episode, or any other podcast, produced by Kensington Security Consulting, represents the official position of the United States government. Until our next podcast, thank you for listening.